At my grandson's wedding, my family tried to hide me, so I became the guest of honor. I was sitting by my window when the postman dropped the envelope. I didn't think much of it at first until I saw the golden edges. My hands trembled a little. It was an invitation, Daniel's wedding invitation. My grandson. My heart warmed immediately, but the feeling didn't last long when I saw my name written in the smallest print at the bottom, almost as if they had added it at the last minute. Mrs. Elizabeth Okafor, it said. Nothing more. No beloved grandmother. No honored guest. Just a name. Still, I smiled and whispered, at least they remembered me. I sat back and stared at the letter for a long time, the memories flooding in like wind through an open door. Daniel as a baby. Daniel running barefoot through my yard. Daniel calling me Mama Lizzie with his small voice. I raised that boy. When his parents were chasing money in the city, I was the one cooking his porridge, teaching him prayers, and walking him to school every morning. And now, he was getting married. That evening, I decided to call my son. I dialed his number, and after a few rings, he picked up. "Ah, Mama, good evening," he said, sounding busy. I told him I had received the invitation and that I was so proud of Daniel. He paused for a second before saying, "Yes, Mama, we're all excited. You'll come, of course. Just make sure you wear something white or gold. The theme is white and gold." His tone was polite but cold, the kind of tone people use when they are trying to sound nice but want to end the conversation quickly. I said, "Okay," pretending not to notice. He thanked me, said he'd send a driver if he could, and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. I didn't need a driver. I didn't need fancy clothes. I just wanted to be there, to see my grandson take his vows and start his new life. The next morning, I opened my old wooden trunk and looked through my wrappers. I found my favorite lace dress, the one my husband bought me before he died. It was not white or gold, just a soft cream color with tiny flower patterns. I ironed it carefully, humming an old hymn under my breath. "I'll look beautiful for Daniel," I told myself. I polished my old shoes, wrapped my scarf neatly, and set everything on the chair beside my bed. That night, I barely slept. I kept remembering the last time I saw Daniel. He had come to visit me after graduating from university. He hugged me tightly and said, "Grandma, when I make it, I'll build you a new house." I laughed then, telling him that all I wanted was his happiness. But deep down, I believed him. The day before the wedding, I went to the market to buy small gifts, a Bible for the couple, wrapped in shiny paper, and a simple card where I wrote, "May your home be filled with love, laughter, and patience." My neighbor, Mama Rose, saw me returning home and asked where I was going. When I told her, she smiled and said, "Ah, you'll look like a queen there, Mama Lizzie." I laughed, though something inside me whispered otherwise. There was a part of me that felt small, like I was being invited out of duty, not love. But I pushed that thought away. I told myself not to think too much. That night, I sat by the window again, looking at the moonlight washing over the compound. I remembered how my husband used to sit beside me, telling me not to worry about the future. "Our children will remember us," he always said. I smiled sadly, whispering, "You were wrong, my dear. They remember when it's convenient." I wiped a tear quickly before it could fall. No, I wasn't going to cry tonight. Tomorrow would be a happy day. My Daniel was getting married. The next morning, I woke up early, bathed, and dressed slowly. I looked at myself in the small mirror. My hair was now gray, my face lined with years of hard work and prayers. But when I smiled, I still saw the young woman I once was. I wore my lace dress, tied my scarf, and picked up my small handbag. I carried my gift and locked my door. The road to the city was long, but I didn't mind. I took a bus, sitting quietly as people chatted around me. When I finally reached the hotel where the wedding was taking place, I stopped at the gate, staring in awe. The building looked like a palace. Cars gleamed under the sun, and guests in shiny clothes walked around laughing. I held my invitation tightly and walked toward the entrance. The guard at the gate looked at me strangely, then took my card. He squinted at it and said, "Who invited you, Mama?" I told him my son's name, and before he could respond, my daughter-in-law appeared. She was wearing a sparkling gold gown, her hair tied up like a crown. She froze for a second when she saw me. "Mama! Oh, you came early," she said, her smile tight. I smiled back, saying, "Yes, my daughter. I didn't want to be late." She glanced around nervously. Mama, please wait here for now. We'll call you when it's time to come in. The hall is crowded, and, well, we're still organizing things." Her eyes didn't meet mine. I nodded slowly, pretending to understand, even though my chest felt heavy. "All right, my dear," I said softly. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking fast against the tiles. I stood there, holding my bag, unsure where to go. Finally, I found a small bench near the garden and sat down. The sun was hot, but I stayed there, smiling faintly as guests passed by without noticing me. I could hear laughter and music coming from inside the hall. Every sound felt like a wall between me and my family. I opened my small bag and looked at the Bible I brought as a gift. My fingers brushed over the gold letters on the cover. I whispered a short prayer for my grandson's marriage. After a while, one of the young boys carrying drinks came out and stopped when he saw me. "Mama, are you okay?" he asked kindly. I nodded. He gave me a cold bottle of water. I thanked him, my voice barely steady. As he left, I looked at the grand entrance again. I could hear Daniel's voice echoing faintly through the microphone, calling out names. His mother, his father, his bride's family, but not mine. My heart trembled a little. I laughed softly to myself and said, maybe they'll mention me later. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. The music got louder, and people inside cheered. I wanted to leave, to walk away quietly, but something in me refused. I had come too far to be turned away like a beggar. I wiped the corner of my eyes with my scarf, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to myself, "No, Elizabeth, you'll stay. You'll see your grandson marry, whether they want you here or not." I took a deep breath and lifted my chin. The world might have forgotten me, but I wouldn't forget who I am. I am his grandmother, the one who carried his story before anyone else even knew his name. And that alone was reason enough to stay. I sat there for a long time, watching the cars come and go, listening to the muffled laughter spilling out of the hall. Every now and then, I would see someone I recognized from old pictures, but none of them recognized me. I tried to smile at a few, but their eyes slid right past me like I was invisible. My back ached from sitting too long, but I didn't want to move. I was afraid that if I walked away, someone might call my name and I wouldn't be there to answer. The sun was high now, burning the back of my neck, and I used the edge of my scarf to shade my face. I thought about the years I spent feeding these same children who were now too busy to look at me. I had given them everything, my strength, my youth, my prayers, and yet here I was, sitting outside the very celebration that should have been the proudest moment of my old age. A small tear slipped down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it before anyone could see. "No crying, Elizabeth," I whispered. "You're not a weak woman." Then, I heard the music fade and someone speaking on the microphone. It was Daniel's voice. I held my breath, straining to hear. He was thanking his parents, his in-laws, and everyone who helped make the day beautiful. My heart fluttered a little, hoping he'd say my name next. I waited, clutching the Bible in my lap so tightly that my fingers hurt. But he didn't. He finished his speech, and the crowd cheered. My heart sank, heavy and slow. For a moment, I thought about leaving quietly before anyone noticed me sitting there, like a stray guest who wandered in by mistake. But when I tried to stand, my legs felt weak. I sat back down. Just a little longer, I told myself. A young man in a waiter's uniform walked by carrying a tray of small meat pies. He stopped when he saw me and smiled. "Mama, are you not inside?" he asked. I shook my head gently and told him they said they would call me. He frowned. But you're the groom's grandmother, aren't you? I nodded. His eyes widened, and he glanced toward the door. That's not right, he murmured. Wait, hey. He disappeared into the hall, and I didn't expect him to return. But after a few minutes, he came back and whispered, Mama, come with me. I'll find you a place. I hesitated, afraid of causing trouble, but he gave me a reassuring smile. Something about his kindness gave me strength. I followed him quietly, clutching my handbag like a lifeline. He led me through a side door into the hall, where the air was cool and the lights were bright. The moment I stepped inside, I froze. It was like walking into another world. Crystal chandeliers, gold-draped tables, soft music playing. Everywhere I looked, people were laughing, eating, and taking pictures. But when a few guests noticed me, their laughter faded. Some of them stayed, others whispered. I could feel the weight of their eyes on my back, judging my simple dress, my head tie, my worn shoes. One woman even leaned toward her friend and said something that made them both giggle quietly. I felt my chest tighten, but I lifted my chin. My husband used to tell me that dignity doesn't come from the clothes you wear but from the heart you carry. I remembered that now. I walked slowly to a seat near the back, away from the flashing cameras, and sat down. The waiter smiled at me before leaving, and I whispered a quiet thank you. I tried to focus on Daniel. He was standing at the front with his bride, holding her hands. They looked so happy, so young, so full of dreams. I smiled faintly, remembering when he was a little boy playing with mud in my yard, pretending to be a farmer. I wondered if he would even notice me sitting here. I wanted him to, but I also didn't want to embarrass him. Maybe he thought I didn't come. Maybe his parents told him something to keep him from looking for me. I didn't know. The priest began to speak about love and family, his voice gentle but firm. Marriage, he said, is not built on beauty or wealth, but on respect and kindness. My heart stirred at his words. I glanced at my son sitting proudly beside his wife, his face calm and polished. I wondered if he even remembered how I struggled to feed him when he was a boy. He had once told me he'd never forget where he came from. I smiled sadly. People always remember promises when they need you, not after. As the ceremony went on, I noticed the bride's mother standing not far from the altar, her posture perfect, her makeup flawless. She was smiling proudly, clapping softly at every moment. But then, all of a sudden, her smile faded. Her hand went to her chest. Before anyone could react, she stumbled and fell. There was a loud gasp, and everything froze. People rushed toward her, shouting and panicking. The music stopped. Someone called for water, another for a doctor. I stood up instinctively. Old habits don't die easily. I had spent years tending to sick neighbors and children. My body just moved. Give her space, I said, my voice louder than I expected. The crowd parted a little. I knelt beside the woman, feeling her wrist for a pulse. It was weak but steady. She fainted, I said calmly. She needs a... I used my scarf to fan her face, whispering a quiet prayer under my breath. The priest crouched beside me, looking surprised but grateful. After a moment, the woman's eyelids fluttered, and she blinked in confusion. The crowd sighed in relief. Someone handed me a bottle of water, and I poured a little on her hands. You'll be fine, I told her softly. She looked at me, her eyes still foggy, and whispered, thank you. As I stood up, I realized the whole hall was silent. Everyone was staring at me. The woman who had been sitting outside minutes ago was now in the center of attention. For a second, I felt self-conscious, but then the priest smiled and said, God bless you, Mama. You have the hands of an angel. My knees trembled slightly, but I managed to smile. Daniel's eyes met mine across the room, and I saw recognition flash through them. His expression softened. He mouthed, Grandma. I nodded gently, and he smiled. I stepped back to my seat quietly, trying not to make a scene. But I could feel the shift in the air. People were whispering again, but not in the same way as before. Some smiled at me, others looked thoughtful. My daughter-in-law, who had been standing near the stage, avoided my eyes completely. I sat down, folded my hands on my lap, and stared straight ahead, pretending not to notice the sudden change. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt tired but peaceful. I had come to witness love, and somehow, even in my silence, I had become part of it. The priest asked everyone to bow their heads for a prayer of thanksgiving. He said, "If anyone would like to lead the prayer, please come forward." For a moment, no one moved. Then Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Grandma," he said softly into the microphone, "please pray for us." I froze. The room fell completely quiet again, all eyes on me. My heart pounded, and my hands trembled slightly, but deep inside, I felt something I hadn't felt all day: honor. I stood slowly, gripping my rosary, and began walking toward the front, each step steady and sure. I could feel every gaze following me, but this time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. As I walked toward the front, the hall felt suddenly quiet, like even the air was waiting for me to speak. My slippers made soft sounds on the marble floor, and every eye in that golden room followed me. I could see Daniel standing there, tall and handsome, looking at me with the same gentle eyes he had as a child. The bride's mother, the one who had fainted, was sitting now, still a little pale but watching me with gratitude. My son and his wife looked frozen. My daughter-in-law's smile had vanished, and my son stared at his feet, pretending to fix his cufflinks. I reached the front and stood beside Daniel. He handed me the microphone carefully, like it was something sacred. "Grandma," he whispered, "please bless us." For a second, I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, and my hands trembled, but I took a deep breath and looked at all of them, the guests, the lights, the decorations, the children who had forgotten me. And then I spoke. "My children," I began, my voice shaking a little but growing stronger with each word. "Today, I thank God for love, for life, and for patience. I thank Him for the boy I carried on my back who now stands as a man before me. I thank Him for the woman who has joined his journey. But I also thank Him for lessons, the kind that come wrapped in pain but end in peace." The hall was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner. I continued, "Love is not about gold or white clothes. It is not about the loud music or the expensive food. Love is about who will hold your hand when the world forgets your name. It is about the one who will sit beside you when everyone else walks away." As I spoke, something in me released, like a knot loosening after years of being tied. I didn't plan the words. They came from somewhere deep, older than memory. I looked at my son, and for the first time in years, he met my eyes. There was shame in them. My daughter-in-law looked down, her jaw tight. I saw the waiters standing still at the corners, even they were listening. I raised my hand slightly and said, "When you have family, treasure them. Don't hide them because they don't shine like you do. Every wrinkle, every gray hair, every scar carries a story of sacrifice. Don't be too proud to honor where you came from." My voice broke a little on that last line, and I quickly smiled to steady myself. The crowd began to nod slowly, some people clapping quietly. Daniel's eyes were wet. I could see him biting his lip to stop the tears. I placed my free hand on his shoulder and whispered, "May your home never forget the hands that built it." Then I bowed my head and began the prayer. "Father in heaven, bless this union with peace. Give them strength to stand together through joy and pain. Teach them to remember love when it's easy to forget. Let their home be one where forgiveness lives, and may they never turn away the ones who raised them. Amen." When I opened my eyes, the entire hall echoed with "Amen." Daniel hugged me tightly, right there in front of everyone. The cameras flashed, and people stood to clap. I heard someone whisper, "That woman has grace." My heart swelled, not with pride but with relief. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the old woman sitting outside in the sun. I was Daniel's grandmother, and they all finally saw it. As I turned to return to my seat, the MC rushed forward with the microphone, smiling nervously. "Let's appreciate Grandma Elizabeth for that powerful prayer," he said loudly. The guests applauded again. I walked slowly back to my seat, my steps lighter now. I could feel eyes following me, but they felt different this time. Warm, respectful, curious. I sat down carefully and folded my hands on my lap, my heart still racing. The waiter who had brought me inside gave me a small thumbs up from across the hall, and I smiled back. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had changed. People were no longer just eating and laughing, they were watching with softer expressions. During the photo session, the photographer actually came to me and said, "Mama, the groom would like a picture with you." I blinked, surprised. "Me?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes, Mama, the groom insists." I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress, and walked toward the front again. Daniel was waiting, holding his bride's hand. "Grandma," he said softly, "you should stand next to us." He placed me beside him. Cameras flashed as we posed together, and I could hear people murmuring, "That's his grandmother, the one who gave that prayer." For the first time that day, I allowed myself to smile freely. When I looked at Daniel, I saw not the little boy I raised, but the man I had hoped he'd become. Kind, humble, and strong. The bride, too, smiled at me, her eyes sincere. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. "You saved my mother." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "God saved her, my dear," I said quietly. Later, when everyone moved to the reception area, I sat quietly at my table, watching as people ate, danced, and toasted to love. My son came over slowly, looking uncomfortable. He stood beside me, his hands in his pockets. "Mama," he said softly, "you shouldn't have been outside earlier. It was a mix-up." I looked up at him, smiling faintly. "A mix-up?" I repeated. He hesitated, then sighed. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice low. "Things got busy," and he didn't finish. I could see the shame in his eyes. "It's all right," I told him. "I didn't come to count mistakes. I came to bless my grandson." He nodded, but I could tell my words stung a little. He bent down and kissed my hand, something he hadn't done since he was a boy. My daughter-in-law stayed across the room, pretending to be busy talking to guests. Every now and then, she would glance my way, her smile tight and uneasy. I didn't hate her. I pitied her. Sometimes people forget where they come from because they are afraid of being reminded of what they used to be. I just hoped that one day she would learn that wealth doesn't make you better, it just makes you louder. As the evening wore on, Daniel came to sit beside me. "Grandma," he said softly, "I didn't know they made you wait outside." If I had known, I touched his hand and smiled. "It doesn't matter, my child. What matters is that you saw me now." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "You're the reason I am who I am," he said. My throat tightened again. "Then make sure you never forget that, no matter how high you climb," I whispered. When the lights dimmed for the first dance, I sat quietly, watching Daniel and his bride move together, their faces glowing with love. Around them, the guests clapped and cheered, but I saw something deeper, a promise being born. I pressed my hand against my chest and closed my eyes. The music flowed through me like a memory, carrying me back to the days when life was simpler and my home was filled with laughter. I whispered a final prayer. "Lord, thank you for letting me see this day." As I opened my eyes, Daniel looked across the room and smiled at me. He lifted his glass slightly, a silent toast just for me. I smiled back, tears filling my eyes again, but this time they were warm tears, the kind that heal. I had come to witness a wedding. Instead, I found my voice again. I had come as a forgotten guest, but in that moment, I knew I had become something more. After the first dance, the hall was alive again with laughter, music, and flashing lights, but something inside me had changed. I no longer felt like an outsider looking in. For the first time that day, I felt like I belonged in the story that was unfolding around me. I watched Daniel twirl his bride as people clapped and cheered, their joy bouncing off the walls. I could see the photographers circling the dance floor, capturing every smile, every sparkle of light on her dress. And then, through all the noise, Daniel pointed to me. "Grandma," he shouted, "come dance with us." The microphone caught his voice, and the crowd turned toward me, clapping and cheering. My heart skipped a beat. I shook my head shyly, waving my hand. "No, no," I mouthed, but he walked straight to my table, laughing, his hand stretched out like a little boy again. "Come on, Grandma. You can't say no on my wedding day." The people around us cheered louder. My knees trembled a bit, but I stood up slowly, my heart racing with both fear and pride. As he led me to the dance floor, I could hear whispers around me. "That's his grandmother. She gave that speech. She's the one who prayed." Some faces that had looked down on me earlier now smiled warmly, their eyes soft with respect. The music shifted to something slower, gentler, and Daniel held my hands carefully, moving side to side as the lights shimmered above us. "You look beautiful, Grandma," he said quietly. I laughed, shaking my head. "Ah, me? At this age?" He smiled. "Yes, at this age. Always." For a few moments, it was just us, no guests, no cameras, just the bond that had started years ago in that small village where I used to chase him around the yard. I could almost hear his childhood laughter echoing in my ears. When the song ended, he hugged me tightly, and the guests clapped again. I felt tears welling up but blinked them away. I wasn't going to cry. Not today. The MC took the microphone and said cheerfully, "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have learned that true beauty never fades. Let's give another round of applause for Grandma Elizabeth." The hall erupted with cheers, and for the first time, my name rang out proudly in a place where it had once been forgotten. When I returned to my seat, my legs were trembling, but my heart was steady. The waiter who had helped me earlier brought me a cold drink. "You're famous now, Mama," he joked. I chuckled softly and said, "Fame fades, my son. What matters is being remembered." He smiled and nodded, and for a moment, I saw a reflection of Daniel's kindness in his face. I took a slow sip of the drink and looked around. The same people who had once turned away from me now approached my table to greet me. One woman in a sparkling head tie bent slightly and said, "Mama, that prayer you gave touched me deeply. You reminded us what family really means." Another guest said, "My own mother is in the village. I'm calling her tonight." Their words warmed me. It felt as if my pain had turned into something useful, something healing. As the night went on, I saw my son again. This time, he came and knelt slightly beside my chair. "Mama," he said quietly, "Daniel wants you at the high table. Please come." His voice was soft, humble, and filled with something I hadn't heard in years, respect. I looked at him for a long moment, remembering the little boy who used to hold my hand when crossing the road. "Are you sure?" I asked, not wanting to embarrass him. He nodded firmly. "Yes, Mama, you belong there." I sighed and smiled. "All right then," I said softly. He helped me up and led me toward the front of the hall where the dignitaries were seated. Heads turned again as I approached, and the MC quickly announced, "Please, make room for our guest of honor." Guest of honor. The words felt heavy in my chest, not because I wanted the title, but because of how far I had come since that morning. They had tried to keep me out, to hide me, but now I was sitting at the center of it all. I sat down beside Daniel and his bride, the table decorated with flowers and candles. The photographer took more pictures, and Daniel leaned close, whispering, "I'll frame this one, Grandma." I smiled and patted his hand. "Just don't forget me when your walls are full of photographs," I said teasingly, and he laughed. Later, as the speeches continued, the priest mentioned me again. "Today," he said, We saw the power of humility and wisdom. The hand that prayed saved not just one life but many hearts. The guests clapped again. I bowed my head quietly, whispering a small prayer of thanks. It was strange. Hours ago, I had been sitting outside under the hot sun, invisible, and now I was sitting under the brightest lights in the room. But even as I sat there, I didn't feel proud in a loud way. I felt grateful. I thought about my husband and how he would have smiled if he could see this moment. "You see, my dear," I whispered under my breath. Our son finally remembered. After the meal, a small girl walked up to me, maybe 5 or 6 years old, holding a flower. "Grandma, this is for you," she said shyly. I took it, my heart melting. "Thank you, my angel. You're very kind." She grinned and ran back to her parents. I stared at the tiny flower for a long moment before tucking it gently into my bag. That small act meant more to me than all the clapping and the pictures. It was innocence, pure and genuine, just like Daniel's love when he was little. As the night began to wind down, people started leaving. Some came to hug me, others shook my hand. My daughter-in-law finally approached, her expression tight but softening. "Mama," she said quietly, "you looked beautiful tonight. I'm sorry about earlier." I studied her face. The woman who once looked at me like I was an inconvenience now looked almost human, vulnerable. I nodded slowly. "It's all right, my daughter. Sometimes God uses shame to teach us where honor truly lies." She blinked, taken aback by my words, then gave a small, genuine smile before walking away. When the lights dimmed again and the band began to pack up, Daniel and his bride came to me one last time. "Grandma," he said, kneeling beside me, "thank you for everything. I'll come to see you after the honeymoon. I promise." I smiled and touched his cheek. "Just keep your promises this time, my son," I said gently. He laughed, hugging me tight. "I will." The bride hugged me too, whispering, "You have the kind of strength I pray I'll have one day." I told her, "It's not strength, my dear. It's just love that never gave up." When they left to wave goodbye to the guests, I stayed seated a little longer, watching the lights fade one by one. The once busy hall now looked peaceful. I picked up my small handbag and the Bible I had brought as a gift. The golden wrapping paper was slightly wrinkled now, but I smiled and held it close. "You did well today, Elizabeth," I said to myself softly. "You didn't need to shout or fight. You just needed to be who you've always been." As I stepped outside into the cool night air, the stars shimmered above me, calm and distant. The driver offered to take me home, but I waved him off. I wanted to walk a little, to breathe, to let everything sink in. My heart was full, not of pride, but peace. They had tried to hide me, but the truth is, you can't hide light. It will always find its way through. And that night, under the gentle glow of the moon, I knew my light had finally been seen. The night air was soft against my face as I walked away from the hall, the sounds of laughter and music fading behind me. My legs were tired, but my heart felt light. The moon hung high above the city, and I found myself smiling at it like an old friend. "You see me now," I whispered, half to the moon and half to my husband's memory. For years, I had felt forgotten, buried under the noise of a world that moved too fast. But that night had reminded me that love, real love, never goes away. It might be pushed aside, hidden, or ignored, but it always finds its way back to the light. I clutched my handbag close and kept walking, the Bible I had carried for Daniel still inside, the same one I used to pray over him when he was just a sick little boy. When I reached the gate, the same security guard who had stopped me earlier stood up quickly. "Mama, you were inside?" he asked, his face full of surprise. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, my son, I was inside." He grinned. "Ah, thank God. You looked beautiful up there when you prayed. Even from the door, we could hear your voice." I chuckled softly. It was God's voice, not mine. He nodded respectfully, and I waved goodbye before walking to the quiet street where I could find a cab. As I waited, I replayed the day in my mind like a long movie. The shame, the waiting outside, the fainting, the prayer, the dance, all of it. I realized something important. The moments that hurt the most had been the same moments that brought everything back together. Pain, in its strange way, had forced the truth out of everyone. When I got home, my small house was dark and quiet. I turned on the small lamp by the window, the same spot where I had read the invitation days ago. I set down my bag and unwrapped the flower the little girl had given me at the wedding. It had wilted slightly, but it was still beautiful. I placed it in a small cup of water and whispered, "Even beauty can rise after being ignored." Then I sat down slowly, my knees aching, and opened the Bible. The gold letters shimmered under the light. I turned to the front page where I had written my note to Daniel. "May your home be filled with love, laughter, and patience." I smiled sadly. "He'll read it tomorrow," I said aloud, "and maybe he'll understand." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of knocking. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I took my time to get to the door. When I opened it, there stood Daniel, still in his wedding suit jacket, though his tie was gone and his eyes looked tired. "Grandma," he said softly. I blinked in surprise. "Daniel, shouldn't you be on your honeymoon?" He smiled shyly. "We're leaving this evening, but I couldn't go without seeing you first." My throat tightened. "You came all the way here?" He nodded. "Yes, I wanted to thank you properly." He walked in and sat on the small wooden chair by the table. The morning sunlight fell on his face, and for a moment I saw his grandfather in him, the same gentle eyes, the same calm strength. "Grandma," he began, "yesterday opened my eyes. I saw how they treated you, and I'll never let that happen again." I looked at him quietly, letting his words sink in. "You don't need to promise me anything, Daniel," I said softly. "Just remember how it felt when you saw me outside. Don't ever make anyone else feel that way." He nodded slowly. "I won't. I promise." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his wedding invitation, the same one I had received. "I didn't know they sent it like this," he said, his voice low. "Your name should have been at the top." I smiled faintly and touched his hand. "My name doesn't need to be printed big to be remembered. What matters is that it's written here." I pointed to his chest, and he smiled again, tears glistening in his eyes. He spent almost an hour with me, helping me sweep the small compound and laughing at old stories. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope. "Grandma," he said, "this is something I've been planning for a while. I bought a small piece of land near the city, and I want to build you a better house there, somewhere close to us." My heart jumped. "Ah, Daniel," I said, almost scolding him. "You don't have to do that." He shook his head firmly. "I want to. You gave me everything when I had nothing. It's time I return a little." My eyes filled with tears I didn't try to hide. "May God bless you, my son," I whispered, "and may your home never lack peace." After he left, I sat by the window again, watching him drive away, the car fading into the distance. The road shimmered under the morning sun, and I felt a quiet peace wash over me. I thought about how life had come full circle. The child I once carried had now carried me in his heart. The people who tried to hide me had been forced to see my worth, but I didn't hold anger toward them anymore. Age has a way of sanding down the sharp edges of pain until all that's left is understanding. I wasn't angry that they had tried to hide me. I was grateful that I had stayed long enough to see them change. That afternoon, as I prepared lunch, I heard a knock again. This time, it was my daughter-in-law. I paused for a moment before opening the door. She was standing there, dressed simply, no makeup, no jewelry, holding a small basket. "Mama," she said softly, "I brought you food. Daniel told me you live alone." I looked at her carefully. Her tone wasn't sharp like before. There was something new in her voice. Humility. "Come in, My daughter, I said gently. She entered, looking around the small living room. I didn't know your house was this far from the main road, she murmured. Yes, I replied. Far enough for peace to live here. She smiled faintly and handed me the basket. There's rice and stew. I made it myself. I thanked her, and for a few moments, we just stood there, the silence between us soft instead of cold. Finally, she said, Mama, I'm sorry for how I acted. I was wrong. I looked at her, and this time, I saw not arrogance but regret. You were afraid, I said simply. You thought I would embarrass you. But life has a way of teaching us that shame comes not from where we come from, but from forgetting who we are. Her eyes glistened. You're right, she whispered. I'll never forget again. I touched her shoulder gently. Good. Now go and take care of my grandson's wife. She'll need your guidance more than she knows. She nodded, smiling genuinely this time. Thank you, Mama. As she turned to leave, I watched her and felt a deep warmth in my chest. It wasn't revenge I felt, it was peace. That night, I sat outside again, watching the stars. The house was quiet except for the sound of crickets. I closed my eyes and whispered, Thank you, Lord, for this story you gave me. I thought about everything that had happened, from the moment I opened that invitation to the moment Daniel knelt beside me. Life had tested me with loneliness and humiliation, but it had ended with honor. I smiled and whispered, They tried to hide me, but you lifted me higher. The cool breeze brushed my face, almost like a gentle pat from heaven. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the moon, and said softly, If this is what old age feels like, I don't mind growing older. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely seen. Not just by others, but by God Himself. I was no longer the forgotten grandmother waiting outside the door. I was a guest of honor in the story of my own life.